You wake up, swing your legs out of bed, and the second your feet hit the floor, you feel it. A stiff, biting ache at the back of your heel. You take a few steps and slowly it eases. So you think, hey, it's probably nothing. But later that day, you go on a run, or maybe you play a game of football, and at first it feels uncomfortable. But after a few minutes, it warms up, and you convince yourself you've gotten away with it. But by the next morning, it's back. Only this time, it's taking a lot longer to settle. Then it starts showing up at the beginning of every run, then after training and walking upstairs, and every morning you get out of bed. And that's the frustrating thing about an Achilles tendinopathy. It rarely storms in and kicks the door down. It knocks quietly, so you ignore it. And then one day, without you realizing, it's practically moved in. So in today's injury clinic, we're going to be breaking down what Achilles tendinopathy actually is, why it develops, how long it takes to recover, and more importantly, what can you at home do about it? Right, so before we actually talk about how the thing gets injured, we need to understand what the Achilles tendon actually does. Because it's not just some random bit of gristle at the back of your ankle, this thing is quite literally a weapon. So the Achilles tendon connects your calf muscles to your heel bone, which is called the calcaneus. The main muscles feeding into it are your gastrocnemius, which is the big calf muscle you can see, and then the soleus, which sits a lot deeper underneath. Together, these muscles are basically your body's built-in propulsion system. So every time you walk, run, sprint, or go upstairs, push off during football, or try to beat your mate in a race you definitely weren't warmed up for, your Achilles is involved. And it doesn't just pull at your heel, it acts like a spring. When your foot hits the ground during running, the Achilles stores that kinetic energy. Then, when you push off, it releases that same energy to help fire you forward. So imagine it like a really strong elastic band right at the back of your foot. Every stride, every jump, every sprint, stretch, recall, stretch, recall, stretch. Now, that's amazing when the tendon's healthy, but it also explains why it gets so annoyed. Because if you keep stretching and loading that elastic band without giving it time to adapt, recover, and get stronger, eventually it will start sending you warning signs. And those warning signs usually sound like this. Why does the back of my heel feel so stiff this morning? And why does it hurt at the start of my run and then go away as I warm up? Why does it ache so much after I finish playing a sport? That's your Achilles trying to get your attention before things get worse. So how does this actually happen? For most people, Achilles tendinopathy is not just one dramatic Hollywood injury like you'd expect to see in a complete Achilles tendon rupture. There's usually no scream, no slow motion fall, no teammate shouting, "He's done his Achilles." Most of the time, it's much sneakier. It starts with a load capacity relationship problem, and that is the phase I want you to remember. Load is what you're asking the tendon to do, and capacity is what the tendon can currently handle. When they're balanced, your life is pretty good. You can run, train, play football, go to the gym, and your Achilles just sucks it up and gets on with it. But when the load suddenly jumps up above what the tendon is prepared for, that's when the problems begin. Maybe you were running twice a week originally, and then all of a sudden you're training for high rocks or a marathon, and you're running 5 times a week. Maybe you add in hills, or maybe you start sprinting. Maybe you play football on a Tuesday, you train legs on a Wednesday, you run on Thursday, and then all of a sudden wonder why your Achilles has started filing formal complaints against you. Your tendon is basically saying, mate, we need to have a talk. And this is where people get caught out a lot, because Achilles tendinopathy often warms up once you start running. It will hurt for about 5 minutes and then it will ease off. So you might be thinking, oh, lovely, it's gone. But in reality, it's not gone, it's just shut up temporarily. A bit like me when I get shouted at by my friends on pro clubs. Then later that day, or the next morning, it comes back worse. And this is classic Achilles tendinopathy. It will give you enough relief to convince you to keep making those bad decisions. Now, not all Achilles pain is in the same place, and this matters. If the pain is a few centimeters above your heel, This is often called mid-portion Achilles tendinopathy. This is the classic one people often get with football, running, hill work, and sudden training spikes. But if the pain is right down where the tendon attaches into the heel bone, that's more likely to be an insertional Achilles tendinopathy. And insertional Achilles pain can be a bit more sensitive to compression. So this is where the generic advice can generally go wrong. Because someone might say just stretch your calf loads or do heel drop-offs off a step. But if your pain is right at the heel, dropping your heel below the step might squash and compress the irritated area. Big no-no. Now, this doesn't mean those exercises are always bad, it just means the right exercise at the wrong time can still be the wrong exercise. Let that sink in. And this is why finding out the location of your pain matters, because same tendon, different problem, different strategy. Comprende? Cool. So who's most likely to develop an Achilles tendinopathy? I have definitely heard you ask through the camera. Well, you'll be happy to know that the Achilles does not discriminate. How progressive of it. It can get runners, footballers, gym goers, weekend warriors, and people returning to exercise. The biggest risk factor is usually sudden change. Your tendon loves gradual progress, and it hates surprises. So if you suddenly increase your running distance, add hill sprints, change shoes, move to harder surfaces, play more sport, or return after a break and go straight back into your old level, your Achilles might not be too thrilled with that arrangement. Another big one is calf strength, because remember, your Achilles and your calves work as a team. If the calf does not have enough strength, endurance, or control to deal with that repeated loading, the Achilles may end up taking more stress than it can currently tolerate. Previous injury matters also. Old ankle sprains, calf strains, any related injuries in that area, they can all change how you move, how you load, and how confident you are in pushing off. Then, an often overlooked area, we have footwear. Now, I'm not referencing you wearing your brand new Timberlands or your dripped out Nike Jordans. However, changing to lower drop shoes, minimalist trainers, or stiff football boots, for example, can alter the demand on the tendon. Sometimes the shoe is not bad, it's just different, and different is still new to your foot. Exactly. Then we have other wider health factors such as age, recovery, sleep, general activity levels, metabolic health, and medications. But there is an important bit. Risk factors do not mean you're destined to face this injury. They just reduce your margin for error. Think of your tendon like a bank account. Every run, sprint, hill, or game is a withdrawal. Strength, recovery, sleep, and good exercise practice are deposits into that bank account. Achilles tendinopathy often happens when you keep withdrawing funds out of that account more than what you're putting in. And eventually, that tendon will go into overdraft. Now, something that's becoming a reoccurring theme on this channel is what grade of injury do I have?
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to grade that injury.
And tendinopathy doesn't work as simple as saying grade 1, 2, or 3. It's better to think of it like a volume dial that you can turn up and turn down. At first, the tendon's just a little bit irritated. The volume is turned low. You feel some morning stiffness, maybe a bit of pain at the start of your activity, but it settles down fairly quickly. This is the stage that people usually ignore it. Then the volume turns up. Now it hurts more often, it takes longer to warm up, it aches after training, and it starts affecting your everyday activities. Then if it carries on, your tendon can become even more sensitive and persistent. Now we've turned the speakers up to max volume, and the floor above and below you is shaking from the base of the speakers. And by the time this happens, people take it super seriously, but the tendon's already been complaining for weeks or months. So I wouldn't think of it as a clean grade, I'd think of it as a warning system that you should definitely listen to. Early on it whispers in your ear, then it talks, then it shouts. And your job is to listen to it before it starts hysterically screaming at you non-stop. Now, a bit of clarity, Achilles tendinopathy is very different to an Achilles rupture. Feeling a sudden pop, snap, or like you've been kicked in the back of the leg could be a rupture, and this needs urgent medical assessment. So the simple distinction is this: tendinopathy creaks in, a rupture announces itself. Take Alexander Isak, for example, when he did his Achilles this season in the Premier League, the people around him described hearing the injury audibly whilst the game was going on. Out of any of the injuries that anyone could possibly have, I think an Achilles rupture is the one that I'm most scared about. So how long does a tendinopathy in your Achilles take to recover? And this is where I need to be honest with you. It's not usually a 3-day problem. And it's not normally fixed by one stretch, a massage, or a fantastic TikTok exercise given to you by a man talking next to his houseplants. Mild and early tendon irritation might set in a few weeks if you catch it early and manage the load properly, but more established Achilles tendinopathy can often take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to properly improve, sometimes even longer. And that's not because your tendon is broken beyond repair, it's because tendons adapt slowly. Muscles can get sore and then recover really quickly, usually within a couple of days, but tendons are a lot more stubborn. Although I would say they're like that one friend who takes ages to reply to your messages, but when they do, it's always worth it. The recovery is usually going to happen in layers. First, your morning stiffness should improve, then walking feels easier, the stairs become less annoying, and running becomes much more manageable. Then you gradually reintroduce the things you like to do, like speed, hills, jumping, cutting, and sport. But the mistake people make is this. They feel better, so they immediately go back to the exact same thing that caused the problem in the first place. That's like paying off that overdraft we spoke about and then immediately booking a holiday using the exact same credit card. It's just a bit of an unwise financial decision. And the pain going down is not the same thing as your capacity being restored. So the goal is not just to make symptoms quieter, the goal is to build an Achilles that can actually handle your day-to-day life. So what should that rehab actually look like? Well, first, let's talk about what not to do. Do not just completely rest forever. Rest might calm it down temporarily, but it does not rebuild your tendon. And do not just stretch it aggressively every time it hurts, especially if the pain is right down at the heel. And please, please, please stop going out for runs and say, I'm just testing it. Because that's not testing it, that's annoying it. And then you'll act surprised when it's even more annoying. Rehab is about finding the right amount of load. Not too much and not too little. Just enough to stimulate an adaptation without causing a massive flare-up in your Achilles tendon. So early on, you might need to reduce the biggest irritants. That might mean fewer runs, flatter routes, less sprinting, but you still want to keep moving where possible. Then we rebuild. A proper Achilles rehab plan should train both the gastrocnemius and the soleus muscle. Straight knee calf work hits the gastrocnemius more, and bent knee calf work targets the soleus more. And your soleus is a big deal. I'm talking Kanye West in Istanbul, big deal. It works hard during running, walking, and repeated loading. So if your rehab only includes a few straight knee calf raises while holding the kitchen counter, you're probably leaving quite a lot on the table. You might start with some isometric holds. Now, these could be holding a calf raise in a position for a length of time, allowing the tendon to experience that load in a controlled manner. Then you progress to slow calf raises, then single leg work, heavier loading, faster loading, eventually hopping, skipping, pogos, running drills, and changes of direction. Because here's the thing, running and football are not slow things to do. They're springy, reactive, and sometimes chaotic. So your rehab eventually has to prepare your Achilles for that. You can't just do slow calf raises for 8 weeks and expect your tendon to be ready for a last-minute sprint down the wing on a cold Tuesday night. Strength is the foundation, but sport needs energy storage. It needs the tendon to act like that spring again we spoke about at the start of the video. So your rehab journey is basically this: calm it down, build strength, build endurance, build the spring, and return to your sport. And throughout all of that, you yourself, the patient, are going to be monitoring your tendon's response. A little discomfort during rehab can be okay. If the pain ramps up heavily or much worse the next morning, that's the tendon saying to you, hey, this is a bit too much too soon. Not stop forever, just adjust the dose. So if you take one thing from this video, it's this. Achilles tendinopathy is not just a sore heel, it's a conversation between your tendon and your training load. At first it whispers, then it talks, then it shouts, but if you keep ignoring it, eventually it will yank the aux cable and ruin your whole playlist. The solution is not just to panic, it's not just to completely stop and rest, and it's not blindly stretching it into submission. The solution is understanding your load, respecting the symptoms, rebuilding your calf, and gradually earning your way back to the things you actually care about. Because your Achilles isn't just weak, it just wants you to stop treating it like it has unlimited data. And that's the episode done. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any suggestions or comments on what you've seen here today, make sure to drop them down below. And without further ado, I'll see you in next week's video. Don't you know this how? Almost suddenly started